Morning, guys. Obviously, thank you for attending this fourth webinar of the 5 series that we've put together around the Cloud Adoption Framework. This is obviously particularly around your journey to the cloud and a migration masterclass. So really getting to grips with obviously tooling, best practices, and just driving the right success for your organisation and your applications to move into Azure. So my name's Matt O'Connor. I've been in the IT industry for around about 15 years now. So more or less been in the cloud industry for probably around about 10. So very much obviously since the inception of Azure for around about the last 10 years. But that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass across to my colleague, Matt McAvoy.
Morning, everybody. Thank you again for attending this webinar. I'm Matt McAvoy. I am the lead principal architect for Modality. I am the design principal lead for the Modality Secure Landing Zones. And I've been in the IT industry for over 20 years and done everything from first line support right the way through now to what I do with Modality and with Modality's customers and businesses from an enterprise architecture point of view.
Okay, and hi everyone. Oh, sorry, Matt.
That's all
right.
Talking
straight over you. My name is Luke. First of all, I'm a cloud solution architect from Microsoft. So I work with partners to help develop cloud solutions. My main focus is around cloud adoption framework, migration, and automation tooling.
Thanks, Luke. So, guys, I think what I just wanted to talk through today, those who don't know us and those who probably do, just it'd be nice to have a little bit of a refresher. So Modality Systems, we're a dedicated Microsoft practice with about 15 years of heritage across the whole Microsoft stack. So our inception's really been in unified communications, so very much anything around Link and Skype and now Microsoft Teams. We have got the largest practice and some of the most accredited people within the business across that, but also we've diversified our services. So we leverage things like obviously Microsoft Azure for a lot of our own intellectual IP and also helping customers transition. And we also do Office 365 or M365 across the whole security stack. So helping customers deliver business value, through digital transformation, across the whole Microsoft stack, really. How we do that is by leveraging the Cloud Adoption Framework. And we do help our customers understand their cloud journey. And it's about adopting the right technology in the right way, in our eyes. So again, I'll probably touch upon this, and I'll ask Luke in a second to chip in here. But I think the way I see the CAF framework, it's a singular voice. It's probably Microsoft's voice on how the cloud adoption should be done, in my eyes. It's a lot of best practices, from Microsoft partners like ourselves, and not just Microsoft themselves. They leverage, partners who understand the ecosystem and how to drive the best practices and documentation. So we kind of lean on each other. It's a great service. As I said, I can talk about this for the next half an hour, which I won't, but I'll pass across to Luke, who will probably do this more justice than I will.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so the Cloud Adoption Framework we've talked about over the last webinar series, so I won't go into a lot of detail around all of this really, but the key points are really that it's, as Matt says, something that's been developed by Microsoft in conjunction with partners and customers who have had experience on the cloud journey, and it's all about building a set of best practice through a collection of documentation, implementation guidance, best practice tooling, which is designed to accelerate the cloud journey, make it more efficient, and really give you sort of actionable outcomes for business, people, and technology process to achieve your business goals with cloud migration. The key pillars really are strategy, plan, ready, adopts, govern, and manage, of which we're going to be focusing today on adopts. And adopts is very much focused on how you're going to migrate workloads to cloud, whether that to be a sort of traditional lift and shift of infrastructure, or developing new solutions directly on cloud native software and platforms as a service offerings.
Fantastic. Thanks, Luke. So yeah, as Luke touched upon, I think what we'll go through today is exactly that piece. We'll talk around the adopt part of the adoption framework, the cloud adoption framework, but we'll break it down into 2 particular areas for you. So probably not necessarily more around innovate, but we'll talk more around migrate. So we'll go through those, obviously within the slide deck. what we'll include as well is we'll understand obviously from an enterprise scale perspective. So you look at cloud adoption plan. We'll include obviously in this obviously things like workloads, and we'll talk about warrant significant investment in creation of new business logic. We'll look at those workloads that are moved to the cloud through a number of approaches. So we'll talk through the processes to get there. We'll talk around lift and shift and optimize and modernize as well. Yeah, and it'll be a great understanding across this piece of work, so you can get an understanding of the cloud adoption life cycle, and obviously recommend further steps through that. So I suppose cloud adoption framework and migrate, it's about a balance. It's about a balance of migration efforts. So if you imagine lift and shift is probably one of the many common migration approaches, and probably the common most approaches. And the goal of Migrate is to provide customers obviously a single approach to balancing the speed and standard lift and shift with the growth potential of a modernised effort. The purpose of obviously this presentation today is to expose the methodology and establish a maturity plan to ready the team to execute an iterative processes that fit more often choices to a modern specific assets within each workload. So during this process, obviously the balance between the speed and modernisation is a common discussion point. And it's about building a holistic methodology, so you understand what will move where, so optimize what you'll do around lift and shift migrations, and at migrations potentially looking at re-architecting what's it through the 5 R's, but we'll touch upon that within the further slides down. Across here, I'll pass across to my colleague, Matt McAvoy. We can talk through, how we got here, if that's all right.
Thanks, Matt. As you've heard, we're at the adopt stage now within the CAF framework. We've done a number of webinars previously that talks through the relevant steps and the requirements needed to get where we are here today, which is at the adopt phase. So we just want to kind of have a quick recap just to make sure that everyone understands how we get to the adopt phase. The first step really is about the strategy and understanding what it is that you need to do to accelerate and start that journey into Azure. And that might be because you've got compelling business events, so you need to kind of get out of a data center. You might have migration events, or you might have motivations that you want to innovate, or you want to kind of save costs. You may be looking at ways to drive more efficient business alignment with IT, and that might be around optimizing workloads. That might be kind of decreasing vendor complexity or removing software complexity. You may just want to start using Azure as a development platform, which also is covered as one of the 5 R's, which we kind of go into later within this presentation. And then you have to have those prerequisites. So it's understanding what those prerequisites are. So you've kind of got your plan, you've understood the readiness that's needed, and that's about kind of getting people certified. That's about having the right partners in place to understand what it is you're trying to do. It's about kind of realigning those objectives and those business outcomes, and understanding the budgets and the phased investments that you need from the business, and also a way of feeding back into stakeholders so you can see, they can see the returns on investment. They can see the progress. You've kind of got it all mapped out, and you're ready to kind of start going to that first workload. Before you get to that first workload, you should have identified a landing zone, which is a platform within Azure that has all the relevant guardrails baked in. Modality provide that kind of secure landing zone, which has it all baked in from the start. So we have enterprise separation, we have network segregation, we have role alignment, we have the monitoring, all the alerting, all of the security layers in place, all of the ways of alerting about what's happening in the environment and how that's kind of integrated into your on-premise kind of snow tools or service management tools. And then effectively then you're looking now at that first workload and what you're going to do to kind of get that workload from on-premise into Azure. And we touched earlier as well in one of those kind of steps about the factor of 10. So it's looking at kind of easy to move workloads and some complex workloads. And that's all about kind of building your level of experience and understanding what you need to do to have a more mature process. And this is where we are at the moment. We're at that kind of first workload, and we'll look, as well as we go through the slides, about the process that's required to migrate in a CAF framework. So here we are. We're at the migration process. This is where there are 4 defined process steps, which is assess, migrate, optimize, and secure and manage. And what we have within the assessment really is understanding what's associated with what assets are associated with the workload being migrated and determining the suitability. So can that workload be rehosted? Does that workload need to be refactored? Does it have to be re-architected? Are we going to rebuild, or do we need to just kind of replace it and find an alternative? And the assessment piece is where you get insights into your dependencies. And you can use some automated cloud migration tools, which Microsoft provide, and there are other ISVs that provide some of those tools as well. We have a slide as well which goes into that. So you can inventory your infrastructure, and you can assess your on-premise environments. You can start getting that right size guidance in place. And then also you've got that kind of workload level cost estimates and performance metrics. And this is key to understanding how you move to Azure and how you start kind of adding value and how you start optimizing later on, kind of providing that modernization tower, which we spoke about earlier. You need to evaluate the potential cost savings of migrating to Azure by calculating and comparing the total cost of ownership with your on-premise and Azure. And then kind of an understanding there how you are going to save money, how you're going to reinvest those savings back into your platform. As part of the assessment, it's key to account for workload priorities, timelines, and milestones, and justifying everything that you do around your resources and the funding, and then break your overall plan into relevant migration projects. And each group then is related to a workload. And this is where you start getting buy-in from leadership, and you start being able to build and see how a new migration center of excellence will optimize and kind of mature your processes further down the line.
Thanks, Matt. And Luke, obviously, could you give us a little bit of a snapshot on Migrate?
Yeah, sure. So from a migration standpoint, there's a number of different sort of tools, which would be first party or third party, to help migrate workloads. This is going to feed very much from the assessment phase of how you want to migrate applications and what their current state is. So some of those tools might be sort of your replication and lift and shift. So tools such as Azure Migrate, which can essentially take snapshots of virtual machines from data center infrastructure and replicate those to cloud storage to create virtual machines from. Or there's a number of other tools that look at more of the platform services, such as things like the database migration service, the storage migration service, which can replicate directly into cloud native services. There's also tooling available such as Data Factory and Databox, which have other ways to replicate data and databases from on-premise environments into cloud. So there's a number of different tools that fit in here. We have a guide called the Azure Migration Guidance, which can kind of dive much deeper into the different sort of options here. And this is also something that really is going to be driven by the assessment to look at what is the most suitable target for your current workloads, and the tooling is there to really support that migration work and that lift of that data into cloud.
Thanks, Luke. And from an optimized point of view, I suppose, looking at optimization of your environment and looking at how to perform various transformations. If I give like a particular example where, customers, and what we traditionally see is customers that perform a rehost migration. So essentially there's not much of a change with regards to rehosting. So the efforts to move is basically based on the current state of the application. But it's moving with minimal change and minimal change to the overall architecture. So if you imagine, obviously, you might want to revisit it later down the line, obviously with configuration, and perform some refactoring to modernize the application. Obviously they go pretty much hand in hand. So if you look at it from a resize of the VM, if I give you an example, looking at resizing maybe a SQL database or a storage account, and obviously based off the back of that, you can look at performance cost analysis and review, where you are. And I think what I wanted to do here is obviously, from what Matt was talking around the assessment process, we go into 5 Rs. Now, this is a very, very big subject, and we could probably talk for the next hour or so on this particular subject. But I think this kind of gives you an understanding of, from a process point of view, the rationalization thoughts that you've got to go through in order to get to a particular understanding of how the workload should sit or where it should sit within the process. And like I said to you previously, it is a traditional lift and shift migration that we see customers do, with a little bit more of refactoring, if it's viable. But yeah, the 5 Rs we can touch upon. I mean, Matt, do you think there's anything in there you wanna?
Yeah, I think this is a great slide to for those individuals that have never seen or have heard about the 5 Rs but don't fully understand what it is. This is a great way of driving taxonomy into the business. So when you're having meetings with your stakeholders and you're using a language effectively that everybody understands and everyone knows what a rehost is and understands what refactor is and what's involved and what the drivers are around a rehost and a refactor. It's a great way of standardizing of how you kind of interact with each other within the business, and then once you've kind of got that standard taxonomy, people understand what you're talking about, what's involved, and they also know the drivers effectively that are associated with each one of those 5 Rs.
Thanks, Matt. And Luke, is there anything you want to give from a Microsoft perspective around the rationalization of the 5 Rs?
So really, where we're looking at 5 Rs, it's the same sort of things you've touched on already. So I won't add too much more to this, but it's really looking at when you're looking at key workloads, how are you best looking to move those from a strategic point of view to cloud? If you're looking to just replicate and move them as virtual machines, it can be an easy and fast way to do a cloud migration, but it's not necessarily the most cost efficient or effective way of doing so. And actually, if you go back to things like the strategy and planning earlier on in the cloud adoption framework, you might see actually your business drivers for moving to cloud are actually very much aligned to things like data and analytics, AI, and advanced workloads. And when you look at that sort of scenario, it may well then shift towards looking at some of the other Rs, which are looking at more modernization or innovation to your applications. So this really should be driven by a strategic objective of what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day, and making sure that the outcome of those migrations align. And some applications will fit different scenarios based on really the outcomes you're trying to achieve with them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Luke.
I think we touched on this earlier about the migration process, and what we've done here in this slide is align each of those migration processes with some of the tools that Luke discussed. With Azure, a lot of the tools that you get are free; they're built into the platform. For each of the relevant options that you have and each of the relevant processes that you have, there's a tool that you can use to either kind of do that assessment. You can understand what that tool is going to assess and the information you're going to get from that. So for things like Azure Migrate and the data migration assistant, these are all really well-defined, well-used tools that have been around in the industry for a long time. Modality used them on a regular basis when we kind of help customers move into Azure. So if you've got things like a Hyper-V estate, or you've got a large VMware environment, or even a small VMware environment, Azure Site Recovery ASR is a great tool that you can use to start replicating those workloads into Azure, and you can almost like start failing them over, and there's lots of kind of test templates that you can run as part of that. And I think Luke touched on the Azure Data Box and the capabilities of that. That's designed to kind of absorb data from your environment, and then you kind of pass that data to Microsoft, who load it in the back end against your subscription. For the optimization piece, again, in Azure, there is a cost management blade, which allows you to see what's happening in your environment. So once you've got workloads into Azure, you can see how much it's costing you. You can put in alerts, you can put in budgets around some of those resources and components that you're putting on there. And then the Azure Advisor is a great tool that can show you where you can make savings. So it will kind of give you advice around kind of VMs that you've loaded that they're not being utilized enough, and you can kind of you can scale them down. You might have VMs that you're using quite a lot, and you might want to kind of gain extra savings through hybrid benefit or reserved instances. The Azure Advisor is a really key tool to kind of show you where those savings are, and it's quite a transparent tool. It doesn't matter what workload you're running on there; it kind of looks at the actual workload that's running against it. We didn't really kind of go over the secure and management piece, but there's some key tools within Azure that allow you to see what's happening real time within that environment. So you've got things like the Azure Security Center and the management tools, so you can look at things around blueprints. So I've got some compliance. I want to enable that compliance across my environment. It might be ISO 27001. And the Security Center is kind of showing you what's happening real time. It gives you quite a lot of great tools to mitigate what it's found in the environment. So it might find vulnerabilities in your SQL. It might find vulnerabilities in your firewall. It will tell you what those vulnerabilities are, and it will kind of give you a very good set of processes and procedures to follow. And sometimes with a lot of the mitigated tasks, there's a button you can press, and Azure will go off and fix that task for you. Some of the key things around that kind of secure and management is backup and monitoring, and you can kind of have those kind of really out of the box, really kind of cool backup solutions in place for SQL Server, for VMs, with not a great deal of configuration. There's just some tick boxes, and you kind of tell it what you want and how you want to keep your data and where you want to keep your data. And then all of that kind of is tied up into the monitoring capabilities within Azure, and that shows you what's happening across the entire environment. There's quite a lot of ISVs that provide solutions for Azure, and they work very, very closely with Microsoft. And Luke could probably talk about this more often, in more detail, sorry. But they work really closely with Microsoft. A lot of these tools are, you can deploy them straight from the Azure portal. So for things like Turbonomics and Chef and Zerto, Current, BitTitan, these are tools effectively that you can just deploy as part of a resource group. Luke, I don't know if you want to talk any more around this, but I think the idea really here, isn't it, Luke, is that Microsoft and its partners are trying to enable a really successful migration, regardless of what the tool is used. And I said Luke can probably talk a bit more around some of the Microsoft tools and some of the ISVs that Microsoft work with. So over to you, Luke.
Yeah, sure. So from the ISV side, so we're not looking to tie you into using specific tooling for this. If there's preferences, like you mentioned, things like Turbonomics, Cloudomize, other tools within this, you don't have to use things like Azure Migrate to do this. There are tools that are available at first party, but also third-party tools can offer different functionality. They may well be part of sort of a strategic decision to look at multi-cloud, for example, which may have different requirements based on different clouds. So there might be other reason why you want to use third-party tools rather than the first party. And really, that it is up to you to use which tools you use out there, and very much the decisions in your hand which one you pick. There's a long list of these, so some of these are posted up on the screen here, and they all kind of have their functions and features that fit into the cloud journey specifically for different technologies. So things like if you've got Chef, for example, you're looking at how you're doing configuration management within your applications. You may also have things like Terraform, for example, for the infrastructure build out. There can be a number of different tools that fit in as part of your cloud journey.
Thanks, Luke. I think from this perspective, we wanted to really talk around this and give you a greater understanding of what a mature migration process looks like, and it's more around sort of end state and actions. I think this slide really depicts on our maturity and Modality's maturity and how we execute for the migration process, and how we evaluate, and also how we document, which I think is massively important for when you're looking to migrate. So you take into consideration all of those processes that we go through to assess the environment, to look at migrate, to optimize, and then to secure. But it's how we take the mature operations approach to deliver that. And I think that's hugely advantageous. And what you can see and what this demonstrates is that we know what we're talking about. We align things like sub-processes to fit the teams and the roles and responsibilities. We also fit change management, and we look at change management approvals and processes across the whole IT and business unit. We also look to aggregate the data and execute a workload with constraints and dependency analysis. So yeah, as I said, all this kind of defines the migration process and the maturity of the migration process. And we're happy to share this knowledge with the people on here and our customers, and this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. So just to summarise, guys, and I just wanted to really throw out in a second just some questions if anybody's got any questions on the webinar. But again, I think what we've demonstrated here, this is the 4th webinar that we've gone through, and around the cloud adoption framework. I think it demonstrates a great knowledge around how we can understand and how we can get you to look at your applications and get them the right area and the right way to the cloud. I think that's massively important. As I said, myself and Matt are open to any questions. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the webinar at all.
I think this is a great opportunity as well, is to understand really how easy Microsoft and Modality are helping customers accelerate their journey into Azure. It's a great way of understanding where you are today and where you need to be tomorrow, and also as well as it's always advisable to speak to partners and understand how and where we can help. And also, speak to Microsoft and your Microsoft account managers to understand what they can do to accelerate your journey into Azure. As we've touched upon before, I think Matt showed a really great kind of mature migration process, and that's the end state where we'd like to kind of get people to be at. It's that ability really to enhance your migration. It's that ability to understand lessons learned and maturing your processes, maturing your speed to Azure and your acceleration to the open market. And effectively, it's an ever movable feast, and that processes are refreshed on a regular basis.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I think from, please, guys, obviously we want you to attend the next, obviously, it's our final webinar that we'll be doing around governance and compliance within Azure. So yeah, that's obviously 2 weeks from today. And yes, obviously, please come and join us on the 5th of November. We'll send out links to those who've attended and also the customer base from there. But just want to thank everybody for attending, and yeah, we look forward to hopefully speaking to you in the future.
Thanks, folks.
Matt.